Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us at the Knowledge and Learning Commons. My name is Ning Zhang, and I work at the UN Library and Archives Geneva for the Commons. For the newcomers, the Commons is our space dedicated to informal learning and knowledge sharing on issues of professional development and multilateralism. Today, we're going to talk about work in a changing environment, culture, teams, and individual resources with Goethe University Frankfurt. Before we start our event, let me introduce you a little more about the resources we have for you today. On the screen is a link for a resource guide online that we have prepared for this session with materials that we think could be useful for you. You can also find this link in the chat. We are recording this session, and tomorrow the video will be available on the website. Now, before we really start today's event, a little tech check with you. We're using MS Teams webinar for today's event. Closed captions are available. To enable those, select the three dots at the top of your screen, then select Turn on Live Captions. To interact with you, there is also a chat section enabled to the right of your screen. You can submit any technical questions throughout the session, and our team will do their best to assist you. And if you have any questions for our speakers, you can send them in the chat box. We'll get back to them at the end of the presentation. Just a note, we understand that a lot of you need to go after the event, but our speakers has kindly agreed to stay another 15 minutes for a Q&A section. So feel free to stay with us a bit longer. We'll also have a short breakout session activity to help you interact and share your experiences with others. Now, let me introduce to you our learning objectives today. Today, we're going to talk about the costs and benefits of working from home, the importance of leadership and team culture to make working from home work, mindfulness, a resource from within, in rapidly changing circumstances, and in the end, social identity and identity leadership as further resources in current times. Now it's time to finally meet our speakers who will take us through these topics. We are very pleased to have here with us Professor Guido Friebel, who is a professor for human resource management at Goethe University Frankfurt. We also have Dorian Hartlaub, and Tom Sandevsky. He's the head of policy dialogue projects, and he will also be our moderator for today's session. A warm welcome to all of our speakers. Thank you for joining us. As you know, today's session is in collaboration with Goethe University Frankfurt. Our moderator, Tom, is going to give you more information about it. Now, let's get started. Over to you, Tom.
So, thank you very much, Ning. My name is Thomas Andewski, and I'm delighted to welcome everyone as a representative of Goethe University Frankfurt. We are one of the largest universities in Germany. About 45,000 students are studying at our university, and more than 3,500 researchers are working at Goethe University. Thus, you can imagine that switching into a virtual working mode was quite a challenge for both research and especially teaching when the pandemic hit the world in early 2020. Goethe University is not only dedicated to research and teaching, we also want to engage with stakeholders in society, business, or the public sector. We're doing so because we want our research to have an impact in the real world, but we engaging with practitioners is also a great way for our researchers to learn and get ideas for their own research. We were therefore very pleased when the opportunity came up to conduct a webinar in collaboration with the colleagues from the Knowledge and Learning Commons. Dear colleagues in Geneva, thank you very much for inviting us. We are regularly in touch with policy professionals. We are running a pretty large-scale policy fellowship scheme, the MacArthur Science Policy Fellowship Program, which enables policy professionals to visit Goethe University and other research institutions in our region in order to conduct face-to-face meetings with our researchers. We have fellows from ministries, from NGOs, from the media, but also quite a few policy fellows from the European Commission, the OECD, the World Bank, and UNEP. And I think that some of our policy fellows are attending today's virtual event. We would like to increase the intake of professionals from organizations of the UN system. And if you're interested in visiting us and meeting researchers like Guido and Dorian in person, let us know. You will find a link to our website in the research guide, and there you will also find the contact details on the website, and you're more than welcome to contact me if you have any questions. Another entity at Goethe University which is regularly engaging with practitioners is the Interdisciplinary Center for Leadership and Behavior in Organizations. And today's speakers are both affiliated with the center. I'm happy to introduce both of them. The first one is Guido Friebel, who is a professor for human resources at the Faculty of Economics and Business Administration at Goethe University. Guido's research focuses on HR management, incentive systems, hierarchical and team organizations, as well as gender issues. And Guido collaborates with organizations in field experiments in order to test theories and to investigate how increasing efficiency can go along with better pay for employees and higher job satisfaction. It's a pleasure having you here today, Guido, and we're looking forward to learning more about your recent research. Our second speaker is Dorian Hartlaub, who is a PhD candidate in psychology. Dorian's research interests focus on issues like mindfulness, leadership, and meditation. And Dorian is also working as a coach, advisor, and trainer. It is great having you here today, Dorian. And Dorian will start today's event with a meditation session. I'm looking forward to the presentations and the discussions afterwards. So without further ado, let's get started. Dorian, the floor is yours.
Thanks for introducing us that nicely, Tom. So hello from my side as well. Just to have a quick introduction into mindfulness, I would just invite you to sit up as straight as possible while still being comfortable. Make sure that both of your feet are flat on the ground if you sit on a chair. If you're sitting otherwise, then just make sure that you have a stable foundation. And then I'd like to invite you to slightly close your eyes and with the next inhale, lift up your shoulders towards your ears, then bring them back, exhaling, lower the shoulders, and bring your attention to the movement of your breath in the lower abdomen area, feeling your belly button going out while you breathe in, and feel how your chest and stomach flatten while you exhale. And just take one moment to become familiar with what your feelings, your thoughts, your physical condition in this very moment is like. You may start by sensing the floor under the soles of your feet, feeling the contact to your chair, feeling your arms resting, and being aware of every inhale with your belly going outwards, and exhale with your abdomen flattening again. And if you will, just observe for one instant what you're feeling and what you're thinking at this very moment. Everything that arises is very welcome and just content of your observation. You've now managed to step out of the autopilot mode and arrive here at the present moment, and I'll invite you to take another deep in-breath, inhale, and now exhale through your mouth. And with the next inhale, I invite you to open your eyes and ears and minds for the new contents that Professor Guido Friebel will be presenting now.
Thank you so much. Very useful. We should always do this. We should also do this with our students, I guess many of whom are currently pretty stressed because we are in a new situation. They have to adjust. We teachers have to adjust. Anybody who's interested in this, feel free to post questions about how education has changed in this period. So we agreed that I would have a little bit less than 20 minutes to confront you with some facts about working from home, and then also lead over to what Dorian wants to tell you and what Dorian wants to do with you. So next slide, please. So working from home is not an invention that has occurred only recently. In particular, in the IT sector, people were working from home already in the 2000s and in the 2010s. And very interestingly, a famously big company, Yahoo, which is now anything but a big company, but is more like a niche provider, changed the rules to working from home in 2013 when a new CEO entered. And what she said was very interesting, and it's going to give you some kind of structure about how one might think about the problems in making working from home work. Because she said, to become the absolute best place to work, communication and collaboration will be important. So we need to be working side by side, and that is why it's critical that we're all present in our offices. Some of the best decisions and insights come from hallway and cafeteria discussions, meeting new people, and impromptu team meetings. Speed and quality are often sacrificed when we work from home. Next slide, please. So evidently, this gives us a reference point in the sense that firms are very often concerned about having their people work from home. And in a very famous study, some colleagues from Stanford, and actually a CEO of a very big China-based travel agency, tried to measure very precisely what the consequences of working from home are. And again, they did this before the pandemic. The particular thing here is that this was a company with 16,000 employees, mostly people working in call centers. And what they did was to design a field experiment, a so-called randomized controlled trial, which is also my preferred way of working with big firms. In this world, you are assigning people to two groups, a treatment and a control group, and then you're changing managerial practices, compensation practices, and so on to measure in a causal way whether the change owing to these management practices are improving things or not. And what they found by this very large-scale randomized controlled experiment was that people who worked from home in this Chinese travel agency had a 13% performance increase, which was very much against what most people would have said, because maybe these people who can work from home, they feel less monitored, they may waste their time with all kinds of activities. And interestingly, 9% was owing from working more minutes per shift. So people took less breaks rather than more breaks, and 4% from more calls per minute. So arguably because there was a quieter and more convenient working environment at home compared to a big, busy call center. Now, this is not all. Even better, people were happy. The attrition rate halved. And also the real estate cost of the company dropped massively because Beijing is a very expensive place. Frankfurt is also a very expensive place, by the way. But as a drawback, the people who did work from home rather than working in the call center experienced a drop in their promotion rate. So somehow it seems they got less visible to the bosses who would promote them. Next slide, please. I should say, by the way, that I've tried in these slides that will be shared to always give you the references for these papers. These are all papers that are published in very good econ journals, in very good economics journals. The next one is a study that got a lot of attention because it analyzed how in Germany working from home contributed or not to fighting the pandemic. They really did two things. They merged a lot of data, survey data and registry data and all kind of things to first find out who is working from home in Germany. And I know this is a very big regression, but the main lines are very simple. First of all, you have ceteris paribus. When you're older, you're more likely to work from home. When you have a university degree, you're more likely from home. When you're a migrant in Germany, you're less likely to work from home. Potentially, this is correlated with education. When you're married, you're more likely to work from home during the pandemic. When you have children in the household, when you're a manager, and when your work is PC based. So what we see here is a description which is correct for the entirety of Germany on who is more or less likely to work from home. And this will also be important in one of the next slides. Please, let's move to the next slide. So the next step that the same researchers did was to compute the benefits of working from home. And they found a number of very interesting insights. Working from home effectively shielded employees from short-time work. You may know that in Germany, the main way to deal with labor market shocks and crises is to send people to so-called short-time work. This is work that allows firms to pay less money when people cannot fully work, while the people who stay at home in short-term work do not have massive wage decreases. So by and large, it's the government that picks up your wage bill. But it's, of course, much better if you do not have to go to short-term work because you're still productive. Working from home did precisely this. Working from home supported businesses, and working from home had quite substantial effects on the death rate. Now, you might say 0.2 deaths less per 100,000 inhabitants is not that much, knowing that we're talking here about Germany with 80 million inhabitants, and a relatively short period of a few months around the beginning of the pandemic. This is quite substantial because we're talking about 160 people whose lives were saved because of working from home. And interesting, the effects were largest at the beginning of the pandemic. And the little graph at the bottom of the slide actually shows you that working from home is a substitute to a lockdown. So when you see the line, it shows when the lockdown happened. And the red line is the people who had low working from home intensity. The blue line is the people who had high working from home intensity. And evidently, when people work from home before the lockdown, there's a big difference in the trips they have to do, while in the lockdown, the difference fades away. Next slide, please. So having said all this, the question is now, so there are evidently benefits of working from home during a pandemic, and in a certain way, the pandemic allowed us to try out on a massive scale whether working from home works or not. The question is, do people like it? Now, Nick Bloom, who was one of the co-authors on the working from home experiment in the Chinese travel agency, did a very big survey and asked people whether they liked working from home. Did they feel that this worked better or worse than they had experienced? And you see that 25% say it's roughly what I expected. 60% say it worked better or substantially better than I'd expected. There are only roughly 15% or 13% of the people who said it didn't work out very well. And the numbers are very similar in other countries. There are similar numbers in Germany. This is the US. By and large, it seems that people think that working from home works for them. Next slide, please. Now, what do people like and not like about working from home? This is data from the famous firm Gallup, which is known for the Gallup poll and Gallup voting poll, but they also do these nationally representative surveys among the workforce. And I find very interesting to see that depending on whether you prefer to work fully on site in a hybrid way or fully remote, the pros and cons people find are quite different. People who prefer to work from home, fully on site, believe that they are more productive. And that is not true for people who prefer to work fully remote. And it's also not true for people who prefer hybrid work. People who prefer to work fully on home find it easier to collaborate and feel more connected to organization. And that is not necessarily true for people who prefer hybrid or fully remote. So it seems that the pros and cons of working at home and working from home and working on site are quite different. And that in particular, the feeling of being productive and connected is more pronounced for people who prefer to work fully on site. So there's heterogeneity that needs to be taken into account. Next slide, please. So what are the risks when we think of moving more and more of our work from home? First of all, we could say, oh, it's unfair. Some people may not have the privileges and others do have the privileges. Now, usually this thing within the same firm, one tries to organize this in a way that it's fair. Now, if you can work from home, most people seem to benefit. But who may not, and why? The first point is simply you have family constraints. If you work from home, yes, it's true, you can take care of the kids. But what that also means is that you have more of a burden with the kids because the person who works from home usually has to take care of the kids. And it's very often that this burden is shifted over to the women in the household. This has been documented for a number of sectors. There are space and technology constraints, office space, internet equipments that firms need to take care of. There are social constraints. People with small networks outside of the job may suffer most because they are lacking the sort of interaction that the workplace offers them. There are personality matters. Some people find it relatively easy to make themselves visible and heard and then considered for promotions. But we have learned from the Chinese experiment that people who worked from home had the impression that they were less visible and got lower promotion rates at given productivity. And then very importantly, how much do we need the hallways to transfer knowledge between people? This was one of the arguments of Yahoo to discontinue working from home. Let's dig a little bit deeper in how important this sort of face-to-face contact in work really is. Next slide. So I here very briefly, in less than 2 minutes, tell you a bit about recent work that I myself have contributed to about the incredible important role of line managers in making people productive. There is a new piece of work by my colleagues Hoffman and Tedelis, who show that in high-tech managers are crucial for human resource work, but they need rewards for human resource work. It actually is costly to help other people being productive, because then you find it harder to be productive yourself. There's very interesting work by Sandvik, Sauma, Segert, and Stanton on how firms can actually organize knowledge transfers by face-to-face interaction with the high performers and the newcomers in a firm. Interestingly, this is not something that comes along very naturally by people just talking to each other. Firms need to create platforms for people to meet, for instance, over lunch and exchange information. And this is then what makes them productive. This, again, is one of these randomized controlled trials that I talked about again. And then finally, there's my own work in a big supermarket chain where we asked supermarket managers to take better care of their employees because there was a big attrition problem. And the shoulder to cry on that managers would give employees, they can come there with their problems and so on, is crucial for employee loyalty. So turnover rates dropped massively in the supermarkets where managers were asked to do this kind of work. But the little table shows you again that doesn't come for free, because actually the managers who were asked to spend more time with their employees did so, but they actually spent half an hour per day more on work with their employees, and that meant they roughly had the same amount of time less to interact with customer. So to put differently, the sort of human resource work that managers do is very useful, but it's also costly for the human resource managers or the direct line managers. Next step, please. Next slide, yes. So having said that, and understanding that managers have so many responsibilities and that they are pinned down by delivering on the key performance indicators in their work, they have to produce, they have to get the numbers and so on. It is very likely that in times in working from home where it's even harder to interact with your people, because you don't have the hallways, you don't have the tea kitchen where you're meeting and you have a quick chat about a problem you might have. Managers may feel overburdened in taking care of their workforce by simply using Zoom and so on. You need to meet, and the less you can meet, the harder it's going to be to take care of people. So that makes me believe that it's going to be crucial that teams fill this void, that teams take care of each other. And that would mean that in a somehow paradoxical way, the more we work from home, the more we will need to find ways to be close to each other. How firms can engineer this, how firms can offer platforms and jour fixe and so on for people to coordinate, and how that should be moderated and animated to be efficient, is an open question for research. I mean, we just begin understanding the hybrid work forms, but I guess this is going to be very crucial to both empower managers to take good care of their people who might have the risk of being isolated, and empower teams to take care of each other. And very likely this cannot just work by MS Teams or Zoom. Next slide, please. So with this in mind, working from home has many advantages. Most people like it, but not all people like it. And over time, it may get harder to like it. People who are concerned are not just concerned about, this feeling of being passed over in promotions and so on, but they may also be concerned about not having enough information to do their work properly, because much of the information that is transferred in hallways is tacit knowledge. It is not precisely, oh, you have to do this and that. It is rather the soft information that makes me more productive and also more happy. Managers are crucial, and we know they're crucial by the studies that I've shown you, but they have limited capacity, and their limited capacity will even be more limited by the challenges of doing everything in this sort of, complicated ways on the web rather than by having a quick chat. Firms can create platforms to create closeness, and I wonder what your organization is doing. Sorry to call this a firm, you're an organization and not a firm. We believe, and this is my little bridge towards what Dorian wants to do with you, that social identity, team identity, cohesion may be one of the most important levers to make working from home work. And that's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Guido. And I'm happy to learn what Dorian is going to add from a psychologist's perspective to this issue.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas, and also Guido for preparing my part of the presentation. And interestingly enough, many times we have the impression that there's such big differences between what psychology on the one hand wants to promote or stands for, and economy on the other hand is figuring out. But the truth is that that there's many things that we actually agree upon from both sides in order to really understand how to move forward, and what solutions to make use of in order to get along. So let me recap very quickly. Today's world of work is very demanding. We suffer, or we live in an environment and time where there's lots of volatility, many changes occur that we are actually cannot predict, that are unexpected. There's lots of uncertainty going on, meaning that causes and effects of changes may be understood, but we never know, or we're uncertain about the actual impact of the changes, which is something that we've lived through a lot in the past 2 years of this pandemic that we're fighting against. And complexity and ambiguity are things that are rising constantly. And on top of all of that, we have the situation now where the basic settings of how we perform, how we can do our work are changing. And this, as Guido already mentioned, brings along many different challenges. How can we deal with those challenges? And in one of the book chapters that I've recently published, there's in the publication process right now, we have been looking at just that. What are common stressors and demands that people, especially leaders, have to face in today's world of work on the one hand, and on the other hand, what can be resources that are potentially helpful in order to face the non-work demands in the working from home context. And two things that we could discover in the literature are mindfulness and social identity as resources to assist and support in these times. Resources that might help not only managers and leaders, but even teams and the whole organizational culture to keep in mind. And without going too much into detail with the literature on both of them, I would like to become more practical and start by explaining quickly and briefly what mindfulness actually refers to. So we've done a short mindfulness exercise in the beginning in order to get ourselves set for this session. And basically what we did were 3 steps. And the first one is focusing our attention, which is the basis for any type of concentrative method to really focus your attention awareness and to guide your attention to the present moment, which what we did was focusing on how our body feels in this given moment, focusing on the movement of our breath, which always takes us back to the present moment. And the third thing that we did was to take on a non-judgmental and curious mind, an attitude or posture where we allow our thoughts, feelings, and experiences to be there and just observe what this actually goes along with. And to become a little more practical, we will now do another mindfulness practice, but combine it with some interaction, because mindfulness can be practiced on the one hand in a very formal way, like doing a mindfulness meditation, which is the most known way to practice it. But we can also apply mindfulness in our day-to-day life by using, for example, mindfulness techniques in the way we converse with our colleagues, with our family and friends, by doing 3 simple steps. So first of all, when we communicate with someone, obviously it's important to listen and to be very attentive to what they are telling us. And doing so in a mindful way means that we don't interrupt them. We're just very supportive with gestures and nonverbal feedback. You can nod, but you don't interrupt the person while speaking. The second step is looping. Looping is another way to describe paraphrasing what your body, what your conversational partner has been telling you. So providing in your own words, or resuming in your own words what you have understood that your body tries to tell you, and give the person that you're talking to the opportunity to actually correct or complete if something has been missing in your looping process. And the third aspect is the one where it actually gets where we actually practice mindfulness in depth, because while we are talking to the other person or listening to the other person, we can be constantly checking in with ourselves and yeah, getting a sense of how we feel in that moment. Like, for instance, right now I'm speaking to you, and at the same time I can feel that my breath is rather deep, that even though my breath is deep, I still feel some nervous, some nerves about, or excitement about giving this talk right now, and somehow creating this peripheral vision of what is going on inside of me while being in touch with the other person. And I would like to put this to practice with a quick exercise that I would like to explain to you right now. We're going to go into a breakout session, which will be around about 7 minutes, where you will meet with one other person who will be the buddy for this exercise for you. You'll be randomly assigned to that person, and you'll be asked to apply the 3 steps of the mindfulness conversation. Listening, by giving nonverbal, constructive, positive feedback and not interrupting the person. Looping, after the person has finished to answer the question, to just yeah, communicate them what you have understood that they are communicating to you. And dipping, checking in with yourself and being in touch with what are thoughts that might be arising while the other person speaks, what are feelings that might be coming up while the other person speaks, and to include this in your conversational process. And the third aspect is that you're invited to answer the following 3 questions, which we will also share with you, so you'll be able to see them while being in the breakout session. The first thing, the first question to answer is, what is a value that is important to you and that unites you and your colleagues at work? For instance, if we talk about Goethe University, even though Tome, Guido, and I work in very different departments, what is one value that unites us is the value of research and information. Like, knowledge is something that unites us as one value. And then, how have you and your team managed to live this value while working from home? The past 2 years, many of us had the opportunity, or were even forced to work from home. How did we live this value? For my team, I can say, for example, that we have still continued to work on finding out new knowledge, on keeping up with research, and to sharing this knowledge among our team members with the different channels that we have. And the third thing that I would like to ask you to do when you're with your buddy is to tell your buddy about one situation where you felt very grateful for your teams or your leaders or even your employer's support concerning the home office and the working from home situation. Okay, so I'll exit the shared mode and would invite the colleagues from the Learning Commons to set up the breakout sessions and to share the 3 questions with you, and then we would meet back in round about 7 minutes. We put into practice some informal mindfulness by doing the 3 steps of listening, looping, and yeah, as a third one, dipping and checking in with ourselves. And what we also did, we started to manipulate our social identity to strengthen the values, for example, that we share with our company and with our co-workers, looking at those aspects, because as Guido already mentioned beforehand, besides our leaders having some responsibility, we as members of our organizations always have the most simple responsibility of being the best version of a human being that we could be, in order to really live the social aspect of our human nature. But what is social identity? Social identity means, simply put, that rather than defining ourselves as I and me, we define ourselves as we and us. This leads to the fact that social support actually increases, and also leads to the aspect that once we feel that there's social support, where we feel a lot more resourceful when it comes to overcoming demands and stressful times. And to also connect to something that Guido said earlier, what leaders can do on their side is, well, keeping up with the practice of mindfulness, to being able to focus your attention to the present moment and observe what is going on, and not being reactive, but creating a new type of action in the stream of actions that are going on, and fostering a mindful environment for your co-workers. And for social identity, there's actually something called social identity leadership, which consists of 4 aspects. The main thing is to create a sense of we and us, and you can manage or achieve this by being one of the team, like trying to really level with your team, level with the members of your organization on the most simple and humane way that might occur to you. Doing things for the team, making them feel that you advance and invest in the team and the organization. And as a third aspect, to craft a true sense of us, making it possible for your team members and your organizational employees to feel that they are actually a union. They have some things in common, and as a fourth aspect, that it really matters to be part of the we and us. And with that, I'd like to open up the panel and give back to Tome for the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Dorian, and thank you for giving the opportunity to share experience. So I would like to open the Q&A session, and if you have questions, feel free to ask them. And as a moderator, I will take advantage of my role and ask one question I'm also very personally interested in, and it applies to both Dorian and Guido. So what is your research saying about the issue of saying no when working from home? Is it easier or more difficult to reject questions or from co-workers, from supervisors, or from clients?
That's very interesting. I haven't seen any research on that. I think one of the things that happens when you work from home is that in principle there are clearer start and end dates of your day, right? There are many good reasons to say that I can only work between 8 and 6, and here's my calendar. Oh, in the best of all worlds, you should work between 9 and 5, by the way. Now, you evidently have things to do at home. But evidently, if your calendar is can be accessed openly, then people also can squeeze in appointments into your calendar, right? So you both have a little bit of more excuses to say no and less excuses. On the one hand side, we have more transparency. On the other hand, there are good reasons to say I have other things to do. I haven't seen any research on this yet. I wonder whether people find themselves in a higher degree of self-efficacy at home rather than in the office. Good question. Good question. Have you seen anything, Dorian?
Yeah, I would add maybe one thing. I haven't seen any specific research on that particular issue, but what I've read is that the aspect of self-leadership becomes a lot more important once we have an environment where we have to organize and structure ourselves, just concerning the work content. So there's challenges that arise with that, with respect to the actual aspect of saying yes or being able to say no and defer work. I haven't seen any particular research on that, besides some similar aspect that employees might feel more comfortable in declining duties because they don't have to do it face to face, and this might then influence also the freedom of them not doing so. But on the other hand, they might feel also the pressure to do so because they might lose privileges and losing the status of being able to work from home if they don't obey to requests. So it's a great question and definitely something that should be looked into.
There's one question related to that one by Anita. Do you have any advice on how to detect and prevent burnouts in the overstretched and overworked team while working from home?
I mean, mostly burnouts are individual responsibility, right? When you start thinking of it, there are frameworks that are more conducive for burnouts, and there are frameworks that are less conducive. Toxic co-workers, toxic managers, and so on are very bad for people who are prone to burnouts. In the end, it's our own decision not to. And I think what we just discussed, Tome, your question is very much related to this. The question is, how do I self-organize and self-lead to avoid this? Now, what is always true is one should talk to people who can help. I think in particular in these times where, much of the conflict resolution mechanisms that we usually have are not available, it is very important to talk to HR, trade union representatives, and so on, if you feel that you're being pressurized and there's a risk to end up in burnout. I've heard a lot of this during the pandemic, and I've talked to quite a few people about this. Feel it early enough and get into contact with people who can help you professionally early enough.
I might add that I think one of the main takeaways from our session today is that the social component of human beings being at work is one that is very crucial, and this means that in order to have some way to really figure out very early if people are overworked or overstretched by the amount of work they have, is to really try to find ways to create personal contact, even though it might be through Teams or any other tool that you have available, to just get a sense of how your team is doing, looking from that point of view. Because interestingly enough, we had a situation where people first said, "Oh yeah, we're going to stay at home," and it feels so relaxed, but collectively it felt like the whole burnout and stress that people had been accumulating just intensified throughout this period. And in order to really counteract, I think coming back to the same thing that we would do in presence is try to get a moment, an opportunity to talk eye to eye, to see eye to eye with the people that you have in your teams, and to create this social support system also within the work context.
Great. Thank you very much. So let's add another question, and this one is about upskilling and training. So is working from home opening up more opportunities for upskilling and training? So and the person says that it's personally hard to schedule and commit to trainings with the increase of meetings now that everyone is online.
Dorian, if you want to take the lead, please.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Guido. So I personally believe that that there is a bigger opportunity because what we see on the one hand is that that there is a way to reduce the cost and expenses of training people, because you don't have to buy into big venues and invest in that sort of stuff. And you can do it all online. But as you reflected, there's the challenge of being not really able to separate. And sometimes, especially for trainings, it is helpful to have this switch of location in order to open up yourself and be ready to be trained. I think it generally depends on the structure that you build for learning and training and people, and for providing new skills. And besides the formal training context, I think it is very helpful to have some informal exchange sessions. They don't have to be every week or even every every other week, but once a month, maybe to have a sharing conversation among team members to upscale skills and to promote just what Guido earlier mentioned, that is a big problem, like the informal conversations at the coffee machine that don't take place, just to find new ways and new settings to provide that. Do you have anything else to add, Guido?
Yeah, if I may add, I mean, I have a relatively small team. In total, it's 10 people that I really work with. And I felt that during the pandemic, we were forced to organize ourselves much better, to interact and also see the needs for learning extra things. So we have really implemented jour fixes in different shapes, sometimes followed up by informal events, sometimes not, depending on what is possible. And my impression is the environment has forced us to ask once and twice and thrice and 4 times, do you have everything you need to thrive? Is there something that I can, or somebody I can connect you with so that you can learn the additional thing? So it's a bit paradoxical that maybe it becomes clearer in this environment what is needed, and then you can identify more precisely who can give you the input for upskilling and training, which normally might have gone through as, oh, that person again doesn't know what he or she should do. It's her problem, or it's his problem. They know where the resources are. So if in principle you realize that the situation is harder now, maybe it also means for me that I spend more time on listening carefully on what people need. But again, this is costly. It takes my time. So I can't do it all on my own. Going back to my story, we need to support each other.
Great. So thank you very much. And I will summarize 3 questions and would ask for short answers. And the first one is tips on how to work effectively from home without getting too distracted with social media. And I think that this probably does not only apply to working from home. And the other one is maybe you can give us an outlook where teams and organizations are actually heading to. I mean, there's no going back to the past, and then you elaborated on that, Guido. But what do you think are going to be the next steps, the future trends? And the final question, do you have any advice for young professionals starting and building their careers remotely now that they cannot build personal networks?
Great questions, all of them. Let me have a quick shot, and maybe we just do those 3. I do the one in the middle. You choose whatever you want to. Sorry, Dorian. I have talked a lot to people, professionals in the real estate industry, and really people who know what they do, who know the data, and who are investing themselves, and so on. And currently, because by and large, the question is, will offices disappear? Now, nobody says offices will disappear. And the 2 who I trust most had almost opposite insights. One of them said, I think that in the long run, my company will close most of its offices in Frankfurt. It's expensive, people don't need it. We have created all kind of cultural support systems. So we will very likely just have a few hot desks where people can meet and maybe a jour fix every other week. The other said, nothing will change. In the long run, most firms try to monitor people. They don't trust people. They want people to be there whenever they have an idea and need somebody to implement it, and so on. So I don't know. It seems that heterogeneity is what we will see. And I'd say probably many young people will sort into companies which give them more options. So competition will work in a way that the most gifted, most talented people will impose on their employers that they try to give them some sort of tailor-made solution to their work needs. And that might be the good news about the pandemic.
Yeah, I think very similarly, like what you've just said, Guido, and maybe to refer to one of the like the first issue of social media that was mentioned. I believe structures, setting yourself up with clear structures is a key aspect, which is self-management tools. What always happens with the social media aspect and the phone or the messages, even the emails coming in, is that you have to discipline yourselves on the one hand, and on the other hand, to create yourself clear structures in a way that you say, okay, there's a time where I can really look at those aspects, like checking my email, or besides that, going on social media, because for some people it is even important for work to be on social media. But then there's times during the day where you say, okay, this is just a phone-free time, for example. So you don't even get confused to take your phone, and if it's important, people will reach you by email or something like that. The other thing that I wanted to reply to was the question for the young professionals. I've always felt that for young professionals, independently if it's online work or remote work or in presence, there are big challenges to onboard if there's not a given structure by the organization to do so. And one thing that I really have enjoyed setting up with organizations were simple tools like, for example, the availability of higher scale leaders to be open, or line managers to be open to go to lunch with the young professionals. And the same thing could be done with the young professionals now remotely, to just have some open booking times to have a short break. And if it's just a coffee break where you sit screen to screen for a talk of 15 to 20 minutes, this gives to the young professional the opportunity to really feel seen, because they have the possibility to talk to a leader or manager. And on the other hand, it provides the managers with the possibility of getting to know the new people and those that will come and carry on what has to be carried on throughout the generations.
Great. Guido, would you like to add on this aspect?
I agree. Maybe one thing is I see networks developing in my research world. Young people getting together, sometimes with sponsored by institutions, networks, individuals. One example is that the National Bureau of Economic Research, the world's most elitist and also largest network of academic economists, is setting up new platforms to help postdocs to shape their careers, to interact. Also, they're sponsoring research on the topic, and maybe some of the systems that we're used to in terms of junior work versus senior work may also change. We might think of bringing in the junior workers more densely into teams to learn more intensively from more experienced workers, and mentorships might become more popular and better organized. So things are changing. I think they're going into the right direction, and I think junior workers should put pressure on firms to offer these things. Very often firms are not willing to just offer this because, again, it costs money. But if the most talented people say, I'm not willing to work in a firm, in an organization that does not offer such instruments, then employers will learn.
So this is a great plea for empowerment by young professionals. And so thank you very much for the questions and the answers. And I would like to ask Ning, how can the participants of today's event get further information on the event?
I think they will receive an email with all the resources and, of course, the recording of this video tomorrow.
I wanted to add one last thing to the topic for the young professionals, which is to feel empowered enough, also to just try out and move towards colleagues and managers, because more often than not, they will be actually very happy and open to being in touch. It's just that it hasn't crossed their mind because they've been so busy. So I'd really like to put the focus on the really, like, the, again, the social aspect. We're human beings, and they will pretty much understand and feel happy to support young professionals as well.
Thank you very much. Ning, are you going to wrap up the
Yes,
session?
yes, thank you. Thank you, Tom, for moderating, and thanks to all of our speakers for an insightful and inspiring hour. And eventually, a big thank you to our brilliant producers behind the scenes, Natalie, Nivert, Nadia, Maria, and Daisy. Thanks to their hard work, we have many learning sessions coming up in the next few months. So don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter to find out all the details of joining us. If you're more comfortable to get information from Facebook or Twitter, you can also follow us on these two platforms for a range of resources and fascinating documents from the library and archives. On another note, we have an event on 21st of February. Join us to celebrate together and cherish your mother language on the occasion of the International Mother Language Day. You will hear more about linguistic diversity and the importance of preserving your mother language from the linguistic experts. As you know, we love to hear from you and have feedbacks from you. At the end of today's session, you will see a QR code that you can scan to give us feedback, or just simply email us at comments@un.org. The email is in the chat as well. All the good things must come to an end. In our case, we'll end with a short video showing the library doors closing. But we'll be back soon. Hope we will meet you again this month. Thank you, take care, and bye for now.